complicated. It's somewhat discomfort. It's a little difficult to maintain. Um, a way of life where we want to be observant. And in fact, this wasn't a question that came out recently. We know of it from the Chumash, from the weekly portion. And of course, we remember in the Haggadah where there are four sons that are represented by the wise son, the wicked son, the innocent one, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. And the wicked son says, "What are you doing?" Or if you wanted to put it in America, what the hell is going on? If he was, yes, yes.
What's the need to have a golden watch?
Okay, well, I guess, yeah, that's a good question. Maybe we should ask the priest that. Why golden watch? I don't know. I guess people,
Was it the priest or the rabbi?
the rabbi was wearing the one. People in their 50s always wear golden watches for some reason. Yeah, it's a common thing, right? It is.
Women in the 50s, all people were silver age.
No, it was just a little of gold and
Yeah. It's gold color. It's not real.
it was real gold, but
Some of it, not everyone could afford real gold, but yeah. Well, it was before mass production in China, so you're right. Maybe it was real gold. um, so here we have a quote from Exodus. This is the wicked son's question. It will come to pass if your children say to you, "What is this service to you? What are we doing here? Why are we doing what we're doing?" Talmud Yerushalmi expounds, "What is the service that you trouble us with every year?" Here's a little more modern version of the question. What's going on? Why every year we have to come into the table and listen to the stories? We remember everything from last year. Why? We went over it last year. What's going on? And the Haggadah, of course, has a reply ready for the wicked son. You therefore blunt his teeth and say to him, "It is because of this that the Lord did for me when I left Egypt, for me, but not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed." These are quite harsh words. Usually we read it in Hebrew or in English, but we pass, like Passover, Passover. We don't pay attention to so much. But this is quite puzzling because the child would have a question, and that's a legitimate question. What's going on? What are we doing here?
and it is a question that is written in the Torah.
It is. It's a quote from a verse, right? It's a quote from Exodus 12:26. And the answer seems so improper. Blunt his teeth, and you're upset for the question, and you say, "Oh, it was done to me." If you were there, my dear, you weren't actually going out, right? You would stay there with that approach, with that spirit. What's wrong? He wants to understand. He wants to know, what are we doing? Why are we doing? What is this? The response seemed first disproportionate and second inadequate. He wants to know what's going on, and instead of answering him, you get upset, right? Normally, when people have nothing to answer for a question, they get upset, right? If you have an answer, you would say the answer. Sometimes people get upset for being asked a question. Well, you know what? If you had an answer, you wouldn't have to get upset. You would just give the answer,
Sounds
right?
like a Chinese teacher.
Like a Chinese, Chinese teacher do that? They get upset when you ask them a question?
They just think that if they say, "I don't know," they lose face.
Oh.
They say, "Shut up, don't ask stupid questions."
I consent. There are stupid questions in the world. We did not annihilate all stupid questions, but this, for instance, is not necessarily a stupid one. So we know that the offense is the weapon of the weak, right? If you know how to defend, right? When you write a thesis, or when you write, right? When you want to get your master's degree, your PhD, you write a thesis, you have to defend it. Right? You get asked all these questions and you need to defend it. If you get upset at the one who's asking you questions, you obviously won't win, right? You won't just get it over and say, "Okay, don't ask any questions and just take it as it is." That's not how it works in the real world. And we'd like to take that question and help us to contemplate over the first two mitzvot, the first two commandments that are recorded in our weekly portion, and those commandments are a preparation for the Exodus. And Mechilta, here's a quote. We have these two commandments are to do with blood, the blood of circumcision and the blood of Pesach, the Paschal lamb that the people had to offer while in Egypt before the Exodus. And I'll tell you all about it right away. Here's a quote from the Mechilta, first from the verse in Exodus 12. this is our weekly portion, speak to the entire community of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, let each one take a lamb for each parental home, a lamb for each household, and you shall keep it for inspection until the 14th day of this month, and the entire congregation of the community of Israel shall slaughter it in the afternoon.
And that was a commandment exactly for that year. It's not the commandment we have now.
Absolutely, where you have distinctions between that Paschal lamb and all the other Paschal lambs or Pesach that were offered in generations following that. And of course, when we don't, nowadays we don't offer any offerings, we don't have sacrifice, we have things to commemorate it. But indeed, there were differences, and we'll soon see them.
The generation, the following year, they did sacrifice a lamb,
Mhm.
I assume.
Correct. Yes.
But for a different reason,
Correct.
a different manner.
Correct. And it wasn't in the same way. Yes. And here's what the Mechita says. Why did Scripture require that the Paschal lamb be taken 4 days before its sacrifice? Rabbi Matya ben Charash would say, behold, it says, now when I passed by you and looked upon you, and behold, your time was the time of love. This is a quote from Ezekiel 16. The time arrived for the Holy One to fulfill the promise made to Abraham our father that he would redeem his sons. But they had no mitzvot, no commandments, no positive deeds to busy themselves with in order that they might be redeemed. As it says, your breasts were fashioned and your hair was grown, yet you were naked and bare. That is nude of mitzvot. The Holy One therefore gave them 2 mitzvot, that of the Paschal lamb and of circumcision, that they should busy themselves with them in order that they might be redeemed. As it says, and when I passed by you and saw you wallowing in your blood, I said to you, in your blood you live. I said to you, in your blood live. This is a famous quote. We say it in the time of circumcision. We quote that, and also in Haggadah. You noticed that when you were here? You noticed this when you were in Passover? Did you notice this line when you saw in the Haggadah?
No, this is about wallowing in blood.
Yeah. So this is
novel image, and I don't remember it.
Yeah. Okay, this is taken from Ezekiel 16. It's an analogy. This is it actually starts on a good tone, and then the prophet changes a little negative to rebuke the people over their behavior. The prophet tells about a person who goes in the field and sees a baby girl lying in there, and actually the girl was born from perhaps an undesired pregnancy, and she was not collected by anyone. She was born and was thrown directly on the ground, and no one cleaned that baby. No one even cut the, what's it called, umbilical cord, and it was just casted at the side of the road and was dirty. And this person did whatever he could to, take care of the baby, but for some reason he couldn't take the baby to him. But in fact, he came back sometime later, because perhaps again it's a more of a prophecy, more an analogy than a prophecy. He came back some later, and he says to the baby, "You will see beautiful days." And years went by, and this baby managed to survive. It was still there in the field, and this person came back after some time, after several years, and saw that the baby grew into a girl, and yet she was still neglected. She was still in a state of not being wanted, and that person took that girl to him and brought her home, and eventually married her. Married this, I guess she grew up a bit. He wasn't so old, so the story could hold. Nobody could sue them for it. Anyway.
It wasn't in Taiwan.
Yeah, it wasn't in Taiwan. It wasn't anywhere. Okay, this is a parable and a prophecy, and in fact, this speaks about the situation how the Jewish people were in Egypt. We were filthy. We were denigrated. We were in a place that we had no relationship with God, and no one had any desire. We were enslaved. We were tortured. We were under genocide. The king tried everything he can to kill us, to drown the Jewish babies, to kill them, to bathe in their blood. And in fact, it was God who came down and nurtured us and took care of us and eventually took us out of Egypt and married us, so to speak. This is the unity we have with God. And so this, and I tell you, and I said to you, in your blood you will live, in your blood live, in your blood live. This is written 2 times because there's 2 bloods. God had given us 2 commandments that are associated with blood. The first one is the blood of the Paschal lamb, that they had to kill it, and remember, put the blood on the doorpost. That was Passover. Remember what is Passover? That God had to pass over their houses. God said, I will struck the Egyptians. Whoever stays in a house, a Jewish house, has to put the blood on the doorpost. So this will be a sign, and I will pass over these houses, those houses, when I will struck the Egyptians. So that was the first blood. The second blood was the blood of circumcision, which is not unanimous, not according to all opinions. The people actually circumcised just before leaving Egypt. And soon we'll see what it means and why these two mitzvot, why blood. The association is not so easy to to resonate. Blood usually is not really something you think of when you think right away redemption and taking us out of Egypt. But blood, there's something about this blood. You wanted to say something?
Did the commandment to Abraham Avinu to circumcise himself, did that commandment stay valid during the generations?
So there
It
were.
was neglected, perhaps, or it was not valid and needed to be repeated?
Abraham had transmitted that to his son Isaac, which transmitted that to his son Jacob, which transmitted that to his 12 children, but that was before the descent to Egypt. And in fact, when they were enslaved, they were taken their freedom, their independence, and their, of course, rituals and customs, language, and everything else, Judaism. So what was, when we say why do we circumcise ourselves today, it is not because of the circumcision of Abraham, because that was before the giving of the Torah. So it was more of a traditional thing, but today it is more an obligatory thing. It is a mitzvah that was given to us by God, and that was introduced in this time when the Jewish people were about to get incorporated into a people. There wasn't people, it was just a bunch of people, a bunch of family related between them, and then they turned into a people, into a nation.
Circumcised himself.
Abraham circumcised himself in the age of 99 when he was commanded by God, and in fact he did what he can, but kind of didn't work out. So God actually helped him, aided him with the circumcision. So his hand, he did what he could, but I guess that was before anesthesia.
That's 25.
Yeah.
I had my own at 25.
You had yours at 25?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that. Wow. Why you couldn't back in Ukraine? They didn't.
No. I had it in America.
So it was your call. You wanted to do it. It was your.
Just there was the rabbi who offered it for free. I mean, it was supported.
You're
by
so
God.
Jewish.
Some
I
rich
can't.
people.
You're so Jewish.
I've been penniless all my life.
Okay. Also, but it was under local anesthetics, right?
I think I spaced out.
You spaced out.
Yeah, so it was total.
Ah. Okay. Yeah, I actually also attended in.
Abraham also pulled out his own teeth.
It doesn't say that, but I don't know if they had dentists those days. Well, I think they weren't eating as much sugar as we do. So,
Those days.
yeah. Anyways, Parshat Bo, yeah, indeed, kol hakavod. Yeah. How panga. So Parshat Bo, the portion we're at, is indeed, we ask the question, when does the Torah actually begin? So according to some opinions, of course we know when the Torah begins, it's the book of Genesis, but according to some opinions, the Torah should have begun actually here, because until now it was just stories. Many stories, interesting stories, exciting stories, but Torah is instruction, tells us what to do. It begins actually when the action starts, is when we have to do something. And so far, we're just passive, we're sitting there, we're like spectators. We're watching the whole scene happening in front of us, but we're not a part of it. But when does Torah begin? When it becomes interactive, when the Jewish people are not just being told the stories, but actually doing something and being in action. And this is where the Torah could have begun. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Rashi brings that on the first verse of the Torah. Rashi, the first commentator on the Torah, brings it that on the first verse, when God had created heaven and earth, Rashi quotes his father, Rabbi Yitzchak, which said that the Torah should have begun actually here, where we are now, because this is when it really starts as a book of laws. So Parashat Bo, the portion has, in fact, 20 commandments that are mentioned in our weekly portion. And the two of them that we said now, circumcision and of course the Paschal offering, the mitzvah of tefillin also appears in our portion the first time. And let's see what it means about taking the lamb and bringing it, right? It's 4 days. Okay, here where the verse was here. On the 10th of this month. So the commandment was as follows. God said to the Jewish people, listen, he says to Moses, you articulate that to the Jews, take a lamb, tie it to your bed, stay with it for 4 days. After 4 days, you slaughter this lamb and you eat it. How do you eat it? There's also details with that. You have to roast it, and you need to roast, no cooking, only roasting, and you need to roast it whole. You can't cut it into, put it on a skewer and cut it to small cubes like they do barbecue in, in the Turkish restaurants where they do. No, it has to stay the figure, the shape, and it has to be done roasted. 4 days before, roasting it as one piece. And these are the details, several more details. And Reuben, I forgot this. What is the difference between between Pesach celebrated in Egypt and Pesach observed later by later generation? Pesach sacrifice is right that its purchase be on the 10th of Nisan and required the sprinkling of the blood with a bunch of hyssop on the lintel and on the two side posts of entrance. Like we said, we put the blood, we apply it on the entrance and the doorpost, and it will be eaten in one night in haste, while Pesach of later generation will observe for all 7 days. And here's the quote. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in any way with water, but roasted, head, legs, and entrails over the fire. It has to be done in that specific way. And you're vegetarian, aren't you? I'm sorry for the elaboration. I apologize for the elaboration.
Animals eat us, so we can eat them.
Animals. Well, lamb doesn't eat people. But here's okay. You take the lamb on the 10th of Nisan. You slaughter it on the 14th of Nisan, which is already exceptional. Normally, you go to the market and you buy an animal and you slaughter it and you have dinner. That's kind of how it works.
Slaughter on the 14th, it was done for generations.
Yes.
The eating during a single night, but not single rush, was for generations. And eating roasted, I think, was also for generations.
Yes, right. That was right. That was a mitzvah also applied for all Pesach. Applying the blood on the doorpost, eat with rush and eat roast. All these details, and like everything in Torah, everything has a reason.
Applying the blood on the doorpost will be forbidden action for any later generation.
Right, because that would be misusing the Paschal offering. Although the blood has no other use. Blood has to be spilled. You shouldn't use it. Yeah, so basically if you could dispose of it, then you could do whatever you want with it. Oh, they eat blood? All right, they have soup blood, right? Blood soup they have. Okay. First Josh was getting discussed. Now it's my turn too. Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's so together with that, with the kind of weird ordeal that had to be with that Paschal lamb, with the lamb, we are also quoting Avimatia ben Charash, who said that the circumcision took place on the same night, although according to some opinions this isn't true, because it would, the verse for circumcision only takes place, the commandment, after they left Egypt, at least how it appears in the Torah. And yet, Avimatia ben Charash still argues and says that, like we said in the verse, that I will tell you in your blood you will live. I will tell you in the blood twice blood, because it associates with the two bloods. And this is what the Medrash brings. They surrender themselves. Yes.
Yeah, on the slide that just passed.
Yeah, let me do it again.
With rush. The rush is a kind of tall grass, or what?
No, eat it with rush, meaning you have to rush. You have to quickly, in a hurry.
Oh, really?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you're right. I should write. I wrote. You're right.
Without any verse confusion, with haste.
Yeah, with haste perhaps would be probably a proper. Yeah. You're right. It makes. Sorry, they had to eat it in a hurry, because this was the commandment of God. They had to get it over with and leave Egypt. This was the final step before leaving Egypt. And of course, the matzah, that was not enough there was not enough time, no sufficient time to rise, and that's why we eat matzah and we don't eat leavened bread because you never leave it. So the Midrash said like that, they surrendered themselves and circumcised, and the blood of circumcision mixed into the blood of lamb, and God would pass on each one and kiss them, as it says, and when I passed by you and saw you wallowing in your blood, I said to you, in your blood live, I said to you, in your blood live. Live through the blood of Passover, live through the blood of circumcision. Again, that description, which is somewhat weird, awkward, this gory. God telling the people, I like this scene. I like to see what's going on. We'll soon see what is really the meaning of these two mitzvot. Why were they the catalyst for the Jewish people to leave Egypt? So, in fact, let's explain a little bit what was the story. You see, the Egyptians, they worshipped idols. One of their main idols was actually lamb, sheep, goat, specifically lamb. You don't have to get too much into imagination. You fly 4 hours to the west, you get to India, and until today they have holy cows, right? People say that in America, holy cow, right? People say that, right? That's how I know. Otherwise, how would I know? I visited India. I saw other stuff. I didn't see people worshiping cows, but I'm sure. I'm not sure. I know it's still practiced today. I guess it's not a big thing. Everyone who goes to India would encounter that. Yes.
I figured out why it happens. A cow is a tractor.
A cow is a tractor. Okay.
If you tell an Indian, don't kill your tractor because next year you will not be able to till the land and you'll die of hunger. That's next year. I'm hungry now. But if they tell him, all your gods, Ganesh, whatever the gods are, they will punish you if you eat a holy cow. Oh, then he will not be hungry.
Aha. Okay. Well, they train themselves, you say. It's a matter of training. So just for this to resonate with us so the Egyptians would worship the lamb. Now look at the situation. The Jews were enslaved in Egypt. They had no freedom, no independence, no choice. They were enslaved. They were tortured. They were killed. They were murdered in crazy ways. Associating 27th of January, right? Today is the 75 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. People who survived to tell after the war, many people did not believe their stories. Not because they thought they were lying, but they thought that this can't be, right? That there can't be a situation that you just described where there was death camps, not concentration camps. People were brought and were murdered in efficient ways. How many more we could kill in one day? So just to give you a little bit of understanding, the same story, and perhaps, or not perhaps, proven to have in greater measures happened in Egypt. The Holocaust was 4.5 years, perhaps 5 years if you total everything. This is 86 years of enslavement. 210 was the whole period, 86 years of torture, of atrocities, of craziness. 4 years or 5 years, 6 years you would want if you want to include Kristallnacht until the end. But still, there were 86 years, and the numbers were bigger than that. Yes?
I think the main reason of not believing in the Holocaust was that the Germans can't be that bad.
They can't be that bad.
Yeah, it's a civilized nation. They call him Dichter und the Volk der Dichter und Denker, the nation of thinkers and poets.
Thinkers and poets.
Yes. And then that's what they do.
There's a book written about it, if you know, Banality of Evil, if you ever heard of that book. A lot of people, what? Banality of Evil. Yeah, I think, yeah. People criticize that book, though. It tries to give you a little, to bring you into the mind of a German during World War. And I guess the purpose of the book is for you to understand that everyone could do that. And there's a lot of critics over that because not really everyone can do that. That's what gets that big argument, the big dispute of whether it can happen to everyone. You just get orders and you follow the orders without asking questions. Could really happen to me and you? Frankly, personally, I don't think this is the case. I don't think we would ever get to that stand where we just do things without asking and continue going and petting our little children and our wives, and then going and murdering hundreds of thousands every day. I don't think that could happen to any people that I know, not the people sitting in this room or anyone that I know of my community.
Of course, there were those famous tests that were done in what was it, the 1950s or 60s, where the psychologists took groups of people and and separated them, and some of the people would be the testers, and the other people would be the students, and then the testers the teachers had to electrocute the students, but they weren't really. And you've heard of this.
Oh, right.
They would administer more and more shocks.
Yeah.
They were actually actors.
None of them actually got electrified. None of them.
Were being electrified, but they were screaming and yelling, "Stop it, stop it!" And then they would have the main person who was also an actor in a lab coat saying, "Shock them again, raise the level, raise the level."
Remind me, what was the conclusion of that experiment?
The conclusion back then was that normal, people who normally seem good, normal people are capable of following orders when being told to by someone who seems like they know what they're doing, and when put in the right situation. Not everybody followed it, but most people did.
Most people did.
Most people followed all the way to the
really
lethal level.
Really
to where it got lethal.
Oh goodness, I remember that experiment. I don't remember why it was brought.
Regarding that book, I think the author needed to write it in order to justify herself. She had many friends, or better yet, to justify her friends who had been more or less philosophically guilty in those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some of them materially guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about Hannah Arendt?
Yes.
Hannah Arendt wrote a letter to Roosevelt Roosevelt died. Truman. After World War II, saying that Menachem Begin is going to visit America, but you must deny him a visa because he's a terrorist.
That's what she wrote?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
They even cajoled Einstein to sign.
They sent it.
The craziness of liberal Jews has no limits.
Okay, well, you're sitting next to someone who calls himself liberal Jew. So
I'm not making it up. It's on Wikipedia.
I didn't know that. I believe you. I wasn't saying. I wasn't implying you're making it up. It doesn't make sense to me. But whatever.
It does make sense given the other part of the context.
Mm-hmm.
No, there is a parallel between that experiment and what we're talking about now. People can go to any extremes, irrational extremes.
Uh-huh. Okay, so you're saying no one is innocent. No one can say that this would never happen to me.
No, I think they're all responsible for what they do.
Well, if I'd like to mix in some theological thoughts into this, I think someone who is an observant of a religion, someone who really has a connection with God, does not have that. It doesn't have that thing where you just tell me what I'll do and I'll do it. The people argue with what the Muslims are doing, and they honestly believe that kill themselves. Full liberation, and soon we'll see why that was very important. We're taking people who were enslaved, and then comes Moses and comes to Pharaoh, let my people go, and Pharaoh says no, 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 and Moses says, oh, no, 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 wait, just hold it, okay? At that stage, enslavement stopped. By the way, the first plague, enslavement stopped. The Jews were no longer enslaved. Moses, tells Aaron, he puts with his sticks on the water, and the water turned to blood. Past 1 month, frogs coming, lice coming, wild animal, boils, all the things that Moses is saying are happening. And then finally, Pharaoh, we spoke about it last week. Pharaoh is reluctant to send the Jews. We say it wasn't him. It was already beyond him. He was taken free choice. He wasn't doing it on his own will. He was forced to say he doesn't want to. And Moses tells Pharaoh and announces everywhere there's going to be the last plague, the plague of firstborn. Every firstborn in every family will die. And because many people were not very pious like you just described, in fact there were several children in the house who were firstborn. It appears to be from this father, their firstborn, but the woman was going with other men, and it was forced. So you have several people in every family, even in cases. So just before this happens, the Jewish people are no longer, not only they're no longer slaves, they become masters. They take the sheep, the goat, the lamb, and they tell the Egyptians, he said, what do you need lamb for? And they said, well, God told us to take. What do you need it for? We're going to slaughter it. Slaughter it? Our idol? Our God? We're going to slaughter it? Now, in case that conversation didn't take place, there were 4 days for that to happen. What's going on with our neighbors, Cohen, the Cohen family? I don't know, they got this lamb going on. What's going on? Could you ask them, well, you stop the noise, stop the smell? Yeah, they're going to slaughter it. Their God said they're going to slaughter it. And listen to this. They're going to barbecue it, to roast the smell. They wanted the Egyptians to smell their idol being burned. What are they making? Maybe they're making turkey, maybe chicken, maybe schnitzel. No, you could see the shape. It's a goat. It's a lamb. It's our God on the fire. The Jewish people had to do that. They had to do that to the Egyptian, and this was worse than everything. That's what the Zohar says. This was the 11th plague. Why were they commanded to take a lamb? Lamb was Egypt's idol. God said from the 10th of Nisan, you should take Egypt's idol and hold it in your houses. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and on the 4th they slaughter it. When the Egyptians heard their idol captured in the Jewish homes, they could not rescue it. They would cry their hearts out. This was harder than all other plagues brought to them by God. This is what God did to the Egyptians. It was breaking them completely. The empire who challenged God, Pharaoh who said there's no such thing as God, and God is asking his children, the Jewish people, you take lamb, you keep it, you barbecue it, you roast it, you leave it as is. I want everyone to see it and to smell it and to know what's going on. And so we'll see why was that so important. In fact, it was important not only, it was important for the Jewish people because they were also in Egypt for that long, and some of them were also worshiping that idol. Some of them also did not believe in the existence of God. Again, for lack of choice, for no education, no Jewish upbringing, but for them to burn the lamb was actually even more powerful than for the Egyptians. And this is what we say about the about that story, about why we needed to do that. But still, why did it have to be in such a way? And also, what is this? How does this associate with the blood of circumcision? Why was circumcision also very important? So I know about someone who it was a year ago who lost his father, and he started. Unfortunately, we had two people in Taipei who lost their father. Yeah, both of them was father this year, and one comes sometimes to say Kaddish, the other one doesn't come so often. But I remember when asking someone who is religious, who travels, he's a businessman, and he travels around the world. He comes to Taiwan, he goes to China, he goes to other places, and not everywhere you have a minyan, right? You need, for to say Kaddish, you need a minyan, you need to have 10 men, you need a quorum. And a person was asking this individual, how do you manage, how do you manage to go through everything, your travels, and still make it to the Kaddish? How come you don't have, why is it not such a burden on you, this Kaddish? So he says something very interesting. Oh, this, by the way, what I want to say, roasted, so the smell of the roast will go into Egyptian nose. They will know it is their idol that's being consumed. They were commanded to eat it whole, head, legs, and tail. This could be recognized. So he says this is the Kaddish. He said it's hard to start the Kaddish, and it's even harder to end it. Now, what's the story of the Kaddish? Kaddish, we say, thank God, both of my parents are alive and well to many more years. But Reuben, I know, is saying Kaddish. We say Kaddish to remember, to commemorate, and also to do something positive in behalf of those who are departed. And in fact, when saying Kaddish, it's maybe hard to start it, but it's even harder to end it because you feel how this really associates you with the person who is no longer here. Yes?
I just read about entrails.
Yeah.
Are entrails kosher?
Well, they had to eat some of it, and some of it was not eaten. But no, I'm sorry, they had to take out what was not kosher first. Yeah, everything was.
Here
Yeah,
it said eat with the entrails.
entrails, the kravav, the inside of the animal. Rosho al kraav al kirbo, inside the animal. Yeah, inside the animals, you could. Well, some pieces.
Forgive me for my ignorance.
Yeah.
What's general idea kosher in terms of internal organs, like liver, heart, whatever else is out
We
there,
uh,
stomach.
in our days nowadays there's many internal organs that are not consumed. One exception is the liver that is consumed, and it's only consumed. By the way, liver you could only roast. You cannot cook liver, according to the kosher way, because liver absorbs all the blood,
So the blood
right?
is
And you cannot take out the blood through regular salting, the applying salt. You have to roast it. The fire actually takes out the blood of it. For other internal organs nowadays, we don't consume. People sometimes often eat hearts or other things. I'm sorry. I don't eat any of that.
Okay.
I don't eat any of that. But just for the record,
You want
uh,
to be on the safe side.
no,
I know.
no, I
Is the
feel
problem kashrut or a problem
there are.
because of the taking out the blood?
Yes, there are. So if it was a problem kashrut, no one would have eaten it, right? But it's not only a problem kashrut; it's going into doubts, and you don't want to go into doubts. You want to make sure, there's enough what to eat from the animal. You don't have to get a hold of
The
what's.
Chinese eat the intestines, but they clean them first.
The Chinese eat everything,
No, no,
everything,
not inside the intestines.
everything that has four legs, other than tables and chairs. Somebody once said, other than tables and chairs. If you got four legs, it's on the plate. But
But not inside the intestines.
yeah. Okay, well, we'll have a different class on Chinese diet and parallels to kosher diet, if at all. Um, so what happens is when we want to have a grasp of God, the Jewish people were in a state that they didn't know anything. You remember, this was all a one-sided story. They were in Egypt. God had delivered them. He sent Moses, and they were idle. They didn't do anything up until this stage, right? They were just beholding. God said, blood, lice, frogs, all these 10 plagues, and the Jews were not active. This is the first time they actually take a role in being active. God needs them to punish the Egyptian. Couldn't he just do like that and kill all the lambs or roast them or make a big fire and all of them will just turn into fire? If the burning bush could have been burning and not consumed, would that be an issue to get rid of so many lambs? But God wanted to give us an opportunity to be a part of something. And this was a preparation for going out of Egypt. And the blood, when we say, well, what's with the blood? Well, the blood actually symbolizes life because, of course, we cannot live without blood. In laws of purity and impurity, there's actually an amount of blood that is considered like an organ of someone because without that amount of blood, the person could unfortunately lose their lives, right? We know when something happens, when an accident, a car accident, the things that's needed the most is the blood, right? We need to get dosage of bloods, and in Israel we have a lot of organizations that I myself went to contribute to donate blood several occasions. One time I nearly fainted, so I don't go any longer. Uh,
Just like we cannot live as slaves.
uh We cannot live as slaves.
You just said we cannot live without blood, just like we cannot live.
As slaves, right? Right, right. We cannot live as slaves. And in fact, this is wanting to connect to God. Now, here's an analogy. Let's say you mentioned earlier Albert Einstein, and let's just take for an analogy. Let's say Albert Einstein has a neighbor. This neighbor is an average, ordinary guy, but he's very excited. He's got this VIP next to him on the next door, and he has some questions about physics, maybe quantum mechanics, or but of course he's not at the level of Einstein. You can't just walk in and ask him all kinds of questions. Maybe he might have questions in simple math, or maybe he just wants his son to get some help in his homework. But maybe he doesn't have any connection with Einstein because Einstein, you think, although when Einstein had neighbors, he wasn't as, right? He became very famous many years later. He did get a Nobel Prize while still alive, but I guess most of his breakthroughs were discovered in a much advanced age, and perhaps even some of it after.
He was famous quite early.
Even early in his life, he was already as famous. Remember the exhibition they did here a few years ago, right? Was some of his original manuscripts.
His most famous discoveries come from 1905 when he received the Nobel Award for those. I think the early 10s.
Say it again.
When did Einstein receive the Nobel Award for his discoveries of 1905?
I don't know the year, but the idea is that it was for his early discoveries rather than later. Yes.
Yeah. Either ways, so what happened? Let's imagine this ordinary guy who wants to associate with Einstein, but of course Einstein is up there and this guy is just an ordinary guy. He walks out, he walks his dog, and Einstein comes to him and says, "Could you do me a favor? I need to send this letter, and I can't really manage what post I need, what stamps I need to. Could you do me a favor? Here's some money, here's some change. Would you go to the post office and take care of that for me?" And now what happens? Now a connection is formed. Einstein would never have this guy even, not because being nasty, but just you never, he has his professor friends and all these smart dudes. But now he needs something from him. He's asking him for a favor. Guess what? The connection, there's a bond. Something comes here through that connection. And this is exactly what happens with God. Does God really need us? In that case, Einstein really needed him. Or maybe he could ask someone else to do that. Or maybe he couldn't go trouble himself to the post office and send that bloody postcard that he didn't know how to handle. But in our case, God doesn't really need us, but he's giving us an opportunity to connect to him. He says, "Would you do me a favor?"
Alone there without the Jews.
What?
God would feel they are very alone without the Jews.
Well, I could tell you that we weren't so loyal. You read through the Torah, and God says to Moses, maybe we should get rid of these. We get rid of this and start all over again. We don't.
Weizmann said, that's the people.
Yeah. What? Weizmann
Said, that's the people I have.
That's the people I have. Yeah. Well, that's the best of what we have. Right. So here's what we have. We have infinite God, and we have our finite soul. And how do we connect? How do we connect ourselves with God? We bond ourselves through a mitzvah. God gives us an opportunity where we could connect. Here's what the Rebbe said in Hayom Yom for Eit Cheshvan. Mitzvah is an idiom for tzavta. Tzavta, the Betzalel. Tzavta, tzevet, team, joining, attachment. Whoever performs a mitzvah becomes joined to the essence of God. May he be blessed. Who issues that particular command? This is the meaning of the reward of a mitzvah. Bidyuk. This is the meaning of the word of a mitzvah, is the mitzvah itself. He's becoming attached to the essence of the Ein Sof, which means the infinite light of God who ordained the command, is itself the reward. Don't you think, I'll do that in order to get rewarded. No, you do that, and that is the reward. You connect. And here's how he continues. The above can be understood through an analogy from the physical world. An extremely simple person has an inner sense of bitul, nullity, before the wisdom and greatness of a scholar. A bitul, a nullity, in which he senses himself to be an utter, non-entity. Yeah? The sage, in turn, does not sense or perceive the simpleton. Not that the scholar dismisses or rejects him, God forbid, for that would be an evil trait. He simply sees no connection or relationship with him whatsoever. Now, when the sage instructs a simple man to do something for him, that command brings the simpleton into being. In his own self-perception, he's no longer a non-entity, but a somebody. He has assumed a status onto himself in that he is able to carry out an order of the sage, and it is him that the sage addresses and instructs. In the eyes of the sage too, the simple now exists. He is a somebody to whom he, the sage, can speak and instruct. What is more, the command actually unites the lofty, exalted sage with the gross simpleton. The analog is obvious. It is. What about?
What should be analogy?
Okay. So this is analog, I think. The analogy was the story, and the analog is what you derive from it. No, I don't. Anyway, I thought. Yeah, okay. It is understood that the above analogy, there's no difference at all what the command is about, whether a great lofty matter or a simple trivial one. So this is just to explain to us, but the difference between a simple person and a wise person is maybe years of study and maybe having better understanding and better meaning. But the difference between us and God is obviously higher than that.
In my matter, relatively little is the person commanding understands the commandment.
Correct. It matters little. It does matter because it helps you identify. But for that sake, for what we're discussing, yes, it matters not. God says you should do that, and He gives you an opportunity to connect with Him. That opportunity you hold with both hands, and you say, eventually I could do something. I could become a reality. I could be of importance. I could be, just like imagine a big king walking into, a ballroom, and everybody's waiting for the king, and then a waiter goes with the name tag, and he says, "Hey, Johnny, could you bring me some bottle opener?" Unbelievable. The king talked to me. If it was today, he would take out his cell phone and make a selfie, right? Me and the king. I just got you something that you didn't have, right? But obviously, this is just as an analogy. But the analog is much more than that. The connection that is formed between us and God.
That the halacha for mitzvah is like the analog of the selfie.
Could be. I never thought of that now. We had the bracha. The bracha is a preparation, right? It's like for giving me the opportunity to do that for you. You've sanctified us and you've actually given us, could be a good idea. Instead of saying a selfie, do a bracha. Yeah. Okay. So, and this is what the Rebbe goes out with that saying, and he continues and describes the Exodus from Egypt and this is in chapter 46 of Tanya. And he says like this: such nature in the character of every man, even when they are equal in status. How much more so? Wait, wasn't that? Okay. How much more so when a great and mighty king shows his great and intense love for a commoner who is despised and lowly among men, a disgraceful creature cast on the dunghill. Yet he, the king, comes down to him from the place of his glory, together with all his retinue, and raises him and exalts him from his dunghill, and brings him into his palace, the royal palace, in the innermost chamber, a place such as no servant nor lord ever enters, and there shares with him the closest companionship, with embraces and kisses and spiritual attachment, with all heart and soul. How much more will of itself be aroused a doubled and redoubled love in the heart of this most common and humble individual for the person the king, with the true attachment of spirit, heart, and soul, and with infinite heartfelt sincerity. The story: a king comes, a beggar in the street. He pulls out and he says, "You come with me," and he brings him to his palace, and he hugs him and he kisses him, and he tells him, I'm so happy you're here, and I'm so happy that you're with me, and I love you, and you're a wonderful individual, and I'm so fortunate to know you. What love would that beggar, would that simple person have to the king, taking him from nowhere, bringing him to the palace where no one enters, only him and the king? How much love could that person have? Even if his heart, the beggar, is like a heart of stone, it will surely melt and become water, and his soul will pour itself out like water with soulful longing for the love of the king. For the Holy One, blessed be He, forsakes the higher and lower creatures, choosing none of them, but Israel, His people, whom He brought out of Egypt, the obscenity of earth, the place of filth and impurity, not through the agency of an angel, nor a seraph, also an angel, but the Holy One, blessed be Himself in His glory, descended thither, as it written, and I am come down to deliver them, in order to bring them to near to Him in true closeness and unity, with a truly soulful attachment at the level of kisses of mouth to mouth, by means of uttering the words of God, namely the halacha, and the fusion of spirit to spirit, namely the comprehension of Torah. Reuben, you wanted to ask about comprehension of Torah and the knowledge of His will and wisdom, all of which is truly one with God. So God coming down to Egypt, taking us.
So if there is more connection, if the commandments comprehend.
Exactly. If you knows what? Because it didn't appear to be a righteous, pious person who would say blessings. And the Baal Shem Tov told them, you should know this person, this